Good evening, Facebook people. Tonight we are coming again from Crosby Community Church, and we are reading the whole Bible in 40 weeks. We are on week 14 tonight, and we're back in the Old Testament again tonight. And we are so happy that you're joining us. And again, I have some great friends for guests tonight. I have Mrs. Connie Regal, who is like family. She's been one of our customers since 19.
What?
And we've become great friends. And,
Absolutely.
And minister in your neighborhood when I come up and visit you.
Yes.
That's pretty fun too.
That is.
And then I have Mr. Frank Henniger tonight. Mr. Frank has read a few times now. I think this is your third time reading.
I believe it is. Yes,
Yes,
it is.
yes. So, backed by popular demand, Mr. Frank. So tonight we just kind of want to talk a little bit, and I'll talk to you first, Connie. What's going on in your life? What's going on in your church? Things are crazy right now.
Things are crazy.
Things are crazy. So tell us something exciting that's going on in your church.
Well, we're planning on having Sunday service.
That's pretty exciting.
So that's pretty exciting.
Yes.
And we just give all the glory to God because
Praise Him.
that people are still coming out, and we're trying to find ways to connect with the people who aren't.
Yes.
So that they know that they are still cared for and loved.
Your congregation and your community, right?
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It is. It is a true challenge because we went caroling, like Christmas caroling.
Yes.
Only we did Jesus Loves You.
Oh.
And we went and knocked on some doors, and it just the joy on people's faces
my,
for
yes.
singing, and because we can't sing, but it didn't matter.
Yeah, joyful
because
noise.
It was a joyful noise, and people were just so excited that someone, at first they were a little scared to come to, and they were peeking out the door and,
Yes.
kind of thing. But
Yeah.
then they realized that it was okay, and we just sang to them. We had signs and held up that God loves them and things like that. And it's like, we just need to
Great
do that
idea, yeah.
more often because
Mhm.
people are hungry for fellowship. That's what we were designed to be together.
Yes. And they were probably scared because they haven't had anybody knock on the door in months.
I'm sure,
Yeah.
yes. I'm just sad it took us so long to think about that, but
Yeah,
we
you have
did.
to find another excuse to go visit.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got more
Christmas
people
is
to
coming.
see. That's right, we can
Christmas
sing
is
Christmas carols this
I
time.
might have to suggest that to my church. That's a good
Absolutely.
idea. That's a good
Yeah,
idea. So I think I will
The-
suggest it and see what happens with
The
that.
more people out bringing joy, and first we were just knocking on the doors of the people that we knew. But there were doors next to each other, and then we thought, we're just gonna knock on both of them,
Yeah.
and it was fun.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Blessing.
And you, Mr. Frank, what's going on in your church?
Oh, wow. Hey, listen, we've been having services since May the 17th, I believe. We've been having services, and we're still having them and beginning to grow, even during this COVID time. We're starting to grow again.
Wow, that's exciting.
We're, getting maybe 500 there.
500?
Yeah, what's it?
Oh, come on.
A couple services. Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yes, sir. And that's a couple of services and stuff. Our kids' numbers are up. We're getting about 100 kids now.
Wow. Wow.
So kids' numbers are up. We're beginning, and even during all this pandemic, we are growing and things are starting picking up speed and stuff. And
Now, other than God being there, what do you owe that to? Just being brave and continuing?
being bold, being leaders for Christ, being not being fearful, being respectful. We respect other people's privacy and stuff. We wear masks. We wear masks coming in. We wear masks coming out.
Yep.
But while we're in the service and stuff, we take the mask off and we praise God and we give Him joy. We have got a worship team there that is young and full of life, and they are just bringing it. And it's exciting to see and hear them. And we've got some old people in that sing, but the band and the worship team. A lot of them are young college-age
It's
kids. and
encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, and they do
Yeah.
such a great job.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really, really.
You know, I don't usually drop names, but I want to drop a couple of names. I heard that Linda and Merrill Hutchinson have come back to Bright Christian.
They have. They're with Rock Solid Families.
Yes.
And they have brought their ministry. They was gone for 4 or 5 years. They came back to Bright and brought their family. They have 3 adopted kids.
Wow.
And brought them kids back with them. And it's just so fun and so exciting. See, she was in charge of our children's ministry. And then she was my boss because I teach 4th and 5th grade Sunday school. She was my boss. And then she left. Oh, it broke my heart. But now she's back. It's good. It's fun. Exciting to see that family.
Yeah.
They do such a great job in the community.
Yes.
They reach out to families that are hurting, and Rock Solid Families is
I
there
need to
for
get them in this readers, don't I?
Oh, yes, you need them to be readers. They are so good. And you could probably get that whole family in here to read.
Yeah.
You know, they got 3 kids, mom and dad.
Yeah.
Get all 5 of them to read. I
Yeah.
think that'd be a good,
Yeah.
good
Well,
project.
and our
yeah.
families are so broken these days.
Yes.
We've got broken families, and their ministry is about
Yeah.
families.
And we were made for community.
Yes, sir.
Just as Connie said, we're made for community.
Right.
That's why us being open and people coming and doing community together,
Yes.
it's so vital, so important. We see our church thriving and growing
Yes.
during this pandemic. And why? Because people need that. People need to be together.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very, very
Well, we all praise
important.
God for that.
Yes, yes, you better praise
All right, well,
God.
we gotta get going.
Mhm.
Connie, you know where we're at, right?
I do.
Okay, so when we get to a new chapter, say chapter 18, chapter 19, so people know where we're at.
Okay.
Because they come in and go, they come and go.
I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is 1 Samuel, chapter 18. Saul's jealousy of David. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his father's house. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing, and he gave it to David, along with his tunic, and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Whatever Saul sent him to do, David did it so successfully that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the people, and Saul's officer went well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs and with tambourines and lutes. As they danced, they sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." Saul was angry. This refrain galled him. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcibly upon Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the harp, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, "I'll pin David to the wall." But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with David, but had left Saul. So he sent David away from him, and gave him a command over 1,000 men. And David led the troops in their campaigns, and everything he did, he had great success, because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful David was, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judea loved David, because he had led them in their campaigns. Saul said to David, "Here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. Only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord." For Saul said to himself, "I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines do that." But David said to Saul, "Who am I? And what is my family or my father's clan in Israel, that I should become the king's son-in-law?" So when the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel of Meholah. Now Saul's daughter, Michal, was in love with David, and when they told Saul about that, he was pleased. "I will give her to him," he thought, "so that she may be able to be a snare to him, so that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." So Saul said to David, "Now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law." Then Saul ordered his attendants, "Speak to David privately and say, 'Look, the king is pleased with you, and his attendants, all like you, now become his son-in-law.'" They repeated these words to David. But David said, "Do you think it's a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and little known." When Saul's servants told him what David had said, Saul replied, "Say to David, 'The king wants no other prize for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins, to take revenge on his enemies.'" Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. When the attendants told David these things, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So before the allotted time elapsed, David and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines, and he brought their foreskins and presented the full number to the king, so that he might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him his daughter Michal in marriage. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David, and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became even still more afraid of him, and remained his enemy the rest of his days. The Philistine commanders continued to go out in battle, and as often as they did, David met with more success than the rest of Saul's officers, and his name became well known. Chapter 19, Saul tries to kill David. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David, but Jonathan was very fond of David and warned him, "My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will tell you what I find out." Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, "Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has done no wrong to you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his own hands when he killed the Philistines. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason?" Saul listened to Jonathan and took another oath. "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." So Jonathan called David and told him the whole conversation. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. Once more, war broke out, and David went on and fought the Philistines. He struck them with such force that they fled before him. But an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he was sitting in the house with his spear in his hand. And while David was playing the harp, Saul tried to pin him to the wall with his spear. But David eluded him as Saul drove the spear into the wall. That night, David made good his escape. Saul sent men to David's house to watch and kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, "If you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through a window, and he fled and escaped. Then Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment and putting some goat's hair at his head. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michal said, "He is ill." Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told them, "Bring him up to me in his bed so that I may kill him." But when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed, and at its head was some goat's hair. Saul said to Michal, "Why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped?" Michal told him, "He said to me, 'Let me get away. Why should I kill you?'" When David had fled and made his escape, he went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done. And then he and Samuel went to Naioth to stay there. Word came to Saul, "David is in Naioth at Ramah." So he sent men to capture him. But when they saw a group of prophets prophesying, with Samuel standing there as their leader, the Spirit of God came upon Saul's men as they prophesied. Saul was told about it, and he sent more men, and they prophesied too. Saul sent men a third time, and they also prophesied. Finally, he himself left for Ramah and went to the great cistern at Seku, and he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" "Over in Naioth at Ramah," they said. So Saul went to Naioth at Ramah, but the Spirit of God came upon him, and he walked along prophesying until he came to Naioth. He stripped off all his robes and also prophesied in Samuel's presence. He lay that way all that day and night. This is why the people say, "Is Saul among the prophets?" Chapter 20. David and Jonathan. Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to take my life?" "Never," Jonathan replied. "You are not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without confiding in me. Why would he hide this from me? It is not so." But David took an oath and said, "Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he has said to himself, 'Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved.' Yet as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there is only a step between me and death." Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you." So David said, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon festival, and I'm supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him, 'David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan.' If he says, 'Very well,' then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I am guilty, then kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father?" "Never," Jonathan said. "If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you?" David asked, "Who will tell me if your father answers harshly?" "Come," Jonathan said. "Let's go out into the field." So they went there together. Then Jonathan said to David, "By the Lord, the God of Israel, I will surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed towards you, will I not send you a word and let you know? But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father. But show me unfailing kindness, like that of the Lord, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, or do not ever cut me off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, May the Lord call David's enemies to account. And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, but he loved him as he loved himself. Then Jonathan said to David, Tomorrow is the new moon festival. You will be missed, because your seat will be empty. The day after tomorrow, towards evening, go to the place where you hid when this trouble began, and wait by the stone Ezel. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I were shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy and say, Go find the arrows. If I say to him, Look, the arrows are on the side of you, bring them here. Then come, because as surely as the Lord lives, you are safe, and there is no danger. But if I say to the boy, Look, the arrows are beyond you, then you must go, because the Lord has sent you away. And about the matter you and I discussed, remember, the Lord is a witness between you and me forever. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon festival came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall, opposite Jonathan. And Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, Why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered, David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, Let me go, because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me go away to see my brothers. This is why he has not yet come to the king's table. Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, You son of a perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you, and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he must die. Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father, but Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On the second day of the month, he did not eat, because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David. He had a small boy with him, and he said to the boy, Run and find the arrows I shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, Isn't the arrow beyond you? Then he shouted, Hurry, go quickly, don't stop. The boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. The boy knew nothing of all this, only Jonathan and David knew. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, Go carry them back to town. After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together. But David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, Go in peace, for we have been sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever. Then David left, and Jonathan went back to town. Chapter 21. David went to Nob, to oh my.
Ahimelech.
Thank you. It wasn't coming out. Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and said, Why are you alone? Why is no one with you? David answered, Ahimelech the priest The king charged me with a certain matter and said to me, no one is to know anything about your mission and your instructions. As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever you can find. But the priest answered David, I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women. David replied, indeed, women have been kept from us as usual whenever I set out. The men's things are holy, even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today? So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. Now one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg, the Edomite, Saul's head shepherd. David asked Ahimelech, don't you have a spear or a sword here? I haven't brought my sword or any other weapons because the king's business was urgent. The priest replied, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it. There is no other sword here but that one. David said, there is none like it. Give it to me. David at Gath. The day David fled from Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath, but the servant of Achish says to him, isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sing about in their dances? Saul has slain thousands, and David his tens of thousands. David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. So he pretended to be insane in their presence, and while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gates and letting saliva run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, look at this man. He's insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short of madman that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house? Chapter 22. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All of those who were in distress or in debt or discontent gathered around him, and he became their leader. About 400 men were with him. From there David went to Mizpah in Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, would you let my father and my mother come stay with you until you learn what God will do for me? So he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him as long as David was in the stronghold. But the prophet Gad said to David, do not stay in the stronghold. Go into the land of Judah. So David left, and he went to the forest of Hereth. Now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered, and Saul, spear in hand, was seated under the tamarisk tree on the hill at Gibeah, with all the officials standing around him. Saul said to them, listen, men of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why you have all conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son has incited my servant to lie in wait for me as he does today. But Doeg the Edomite, who was standing with Saul's officials, said, I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub of Nob. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him. He also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent for the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and his father's whole family, who were priests at Nob, and they came to the king. Saul said, listen now, son of Ahitub. Yes, my lord, he answered. Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, giving him bread and a sword and inquiring of God for him, so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me as he does today?" Ahimelech answered the king, "Who of all your servants is as loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, highly respected in your household? Was the day the first time I inquired of the Lord for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servant, or of any of his father's family, for the servant knows nothing at all about this whole affair." But the king said, "You will surely die, Ahimelech, you and your father's whole family." Then the king ordered the guards at his side, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they too have sided with David." They knew he was fleeing, yet they did not tell me. But the king's officials were not willing to raise a hand to strike the priests of the Lord. The king then ordered Doeg, "You turn and strike down the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned, and he struck them down. That day he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod, and he also put to the sword Nob, the town of the priests, with its men and the women, and its children and infants, and its cattle and donkeys and sheep. But Abiathar, a son of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, escaped and fled to join David. He told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, "That day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would be sure to tell Saul, 'I am responsible for the deaths of your father's whole family.' Stay with me. Don't be afraid. The man who is seeking your life is seeking mine also. You will be safe with me."
Good job, Miss Connie. Liked it. Oh, you got the chair nice and warm? Thank you. Chapter 23 of 1 Samuel. When David was told, "Look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are looting the threshing floors," he inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go and attack these Philistines?" The Lord answered him, "Go attack the Philistines and save Keilah." But David's men said to him, "Here in Judah we are afraid. How much more then if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces?" Once David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him, "Go down to Keilah, for I am going to give the Philistines into your hand." So David and his men went to Keilah, fought the Philistines, and carried off their livestock. He inflicted heavy losses on the Philistines and saved the people of Keilah. Now Abiathar, a son of Ahimelech, had brought the ephod down with him when he fled to David at Keilah. Saul pursues David. Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah, and he said, "God has delivered him into my hands, for David has imprisoned himself by entering the town with gates and bars." And Saul called up all his forces for battle to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. Well, when David learned that Saul was plotting against him, he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring the ephod." And David said, "Lord God of Israel, your servant has heard definitely that Saul plans to come to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me to him? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord God of Israel, tell your servant." And the Lord said, "He will." Again David asked, "Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me and my men to Saul?" And the Lord said, "They will." So David and his men, about 600 in number, left Keilah and kept moving from place to place. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he did not go there. David stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hills of the desert of Ziph. For day after day Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. And while David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David of Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. And then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. Now the Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeath and said, is not David hiding among us in the strongholds at Horesh on the hill of Hakilah, south of Jeshurun? Now, your majesty, come down whenever it pleases you to do so, and we will be responsible for giving him into your hands. Saul replied, the Lord bless you for your concern for me. Go and get more information. Find out where David usually goes and who has seen him there. They tell me he is very crafty. Find out about all the hiding places he uses and come back to me with definite information. Then I will go with you. And if he is in the area, I will track him down among all the clans of Judah. So they set out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the desert of Maon, in the Arabah south of Jeshurun. Now Saul and his men began the search, and when David was told about it, he went down to the rock and stayed in the desert of Maon. And when Saul heard this, he went to the desert of Maon in pursuit of David. Now, Saul was going along one side of the mountain, and David and his men were on the other side, hurrying to get away from Saul. And Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture him. And a message came to Saul saying, come quickly, the Philistines are raiding the land. And then Saul broke off his pursuit of David, and he went to meet the Philistines. That is why they call this place Selah Holocaust. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-Gedi. This is chapter 24. David spares Saul's life. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. He came to the sheep pens along the way, and a cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave, and the men said, this is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. And David crept up unnoticed and cut off the corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, oh, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, and lay my hand on him, for he is anointed of the Lord. With these words, David sharply rebuked his men, did not allow them to attack Saul, and Saul left the cave and went on his way. And then David went out of the cave, and he called to Saul, my Lord the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. And he said to Saul, why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hand in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but I did not kill you. See that there's nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. Oh, I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me. And may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will never touch you, will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds. So my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Who are you pursuing? A dead dog? A flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. When David finished saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept aloud. "You're more righteous than I," he said. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You just now told me about the good you did to me, and the Lord delivered me into your hand, but you did not kill me. And when a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? Oh, may the Lord reward you well for that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." So David gave his oath to Saul. And then Saul returned home. But David and his men went up to the stronghold. Chapter 25. David, Nabal, and Abigail. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. And then David moved down into the desert of Paran, and a certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. And she was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was the Calebite. Now, while David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to him, "Now go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my men. Since we come at a festive time, please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them.' When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name, and then they waited. And Nabal answered David's servants, 'Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shears and give it to men coming from who knows where?' David's men turned around and went back. And when they arrived, they reported every word. And David said to his men, 'Each of you strap on your sword.' So they did. And David strapped his on as well. And about 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. Now one of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, 'David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master for his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us. And the whole time we were out in the field near them, nothing was missing. Night and day, they were a wall around us. The whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him.' Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of fresh figs, and loaded them on the donkeys. And then she told her servants, 'Go ahead, I'll follow you.' But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, 'It's been useless. All my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him. And when Abigail saw David, she quickly caught up her donkey, and she bowed down before David with her face to the ground, and she fell at his feet and said, "Oh, pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Oh, please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, oh, I did not see the men my lord sent. Oh, and now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who intend on harming my Lord be like Nabal." And he let this gift, which your servant has brought to my Lord, be given to the men who follow you. Oh, please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies, oh, he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for you, my Lord, every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, oh, remember your servant. And David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment, and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak." And then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him, and said, "Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request." When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king, and he was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. And then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all the things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Oh, praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." And then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, "David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife." Oh, she bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "Oh, I am your servant, and I am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants." And Abigail quickly got on a donkey, and attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. And David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galium. Chapter 26. David again spares Saul's life. Now the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeath and said, "Is not David hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshurun?" So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 select Israelite troops to search there for David. And Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hachilah, facing Jeshurun, but David stayed in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts. And he learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. And Saul was laying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zerah, Joab's brother, who will go down into the camp with me to Saul? I will go with you, said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul laying asleep inside the camp with a spear stuck in the ground near his head. And Abner and the soldiers were laying around him. And Abishai said to David, today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, oh, don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, he said, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come, and he will die. And we will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and water jug there near his head. Let's go. So David took the spear and the water jug near Saul's head, and they left. And no one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. And David crossed over to the other side, and he stood on top of the hill some distance away, and there was a wide space between them. He called out to the army, to Abner, son of Ner, aren't you going to answer me, Abner? And Abner replied, who are you who calls to the king? And David said, you're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were near his head? And Saul recognized David's voice and said, is that your voice, David, my son? And David replied, yes, it is, my lord, the king. And he added, why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done? And what wrong am I guilty of? Now let my lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance and have said, go serve other gods. Now do not let my blood fall on the ground, for far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, and one hunts a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul, oh, I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you consider my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong. Here is the king's spear, David answered. Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord deliver you into my hands today. But I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. And surely as I am valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble. And then Saul said to David, may you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumphs. So David went on his way, and Saul returned home.
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
All right, Miss Cotton.
Chapter 27, David among the Philistines. But David thought to himself, one of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. So David and the 600 men with him left and went over to Achish, son of Maok, king of Gath. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Each man had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, I have found favor. If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country's towns, that I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you? So on that day, Achish gave him Ziklag, and it has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. David lived in Philistine territory a year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and raided the Gershites and the Gizites and the Amalekites. From ancient times, these people had lived in the land exceeding to Shur and Egypt. Whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or a woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkey and camels, and clothes. Then he returned to Achish. When Achish asked, Where did you go raiding today? David would say, Against the Negev of Judah, against the Negev of Jeremiel, or against the Negev of the Kenites. He did not leave a man or a woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform on us and say that this is what David did. And such was the practice as long as he lived in Philistine territory. Achish trusted David and said to himself, He has become so odious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant forever. Chapter 28, Saul and the Witch of Endor. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army. David said, Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do. Achish replied, Very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him and had buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and the spiritualists from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and set up on camp at Shurim. When Saul gathered all of the Israelites and had set up a camp at Gilboa, when Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. Saul then said to attendants, Find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her. There is one in Endor, they said. So Saul disguised himself, putting on another's clothes, and at night he and 2 men went to the woman. Consult a spirit for me, he said, and bring up for me the one I name. But the woman said to him, Surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums and the spiritualists from the land. Why have you set up a trap for me, for my life, to bring about my death? Saul swore to her by the Lord, As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this. Then the woman asked, Whom shall I bring up for you? Bring up Saul, he said. Bring up Samuel, he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried at the top of her voice and said to Saul, Why have you deceived me? You're Saul. The king said to her, Don't be afraid. What do you see? The woman said, I see a spirit coming up out of the ground. What does it look like? He asked. An old man wearing a robe is coming up, she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Samuel said to Saul, Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? I am in great distress, Saul said. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what to do. Samuel said, Why do you consult me? now that the Lord has turned away from you and become your enemy, the Lord has done what he has predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David, because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. The Lord has done this to you this day. The Lord will hand over both Israel and you to the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand over the army of Israel to the Philistines. Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's words. His strength was gone, for he had eaten nothing all that day and night. When the woman came to Saul and saw that he was greatly shaken, she said, "Look, your maidservant has obeyed you. I took my life into my hands and did what you told me to do. Now please listen to your servant and let me give you some food, so that you may eat and have strength to go on your way." He refused, and he said, "I will not eat." But his men joined the woman in urging him, and he listened to them. And he got up from the ground and sat on the couch. The woman had a fattened calf at her house, which she butchered at once. She took some flour and kneaded it and baked bread without yeast. And then she set it before Saul and his men, and they ate. Then that same night they got up and left. Chapter 29. Achish sends David back to Ziklag. The Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The commanders of the Philistines asked, "What about these Hebrews?" Achish replied, "Is this not David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? Has he already been with me for over a year, and from that day he left Saul until now? I have found no fault in him." But the Philistine commanders were angry with him and said, "Send the man back, that he may return to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fight. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." So Achish called David and said to him, "As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until now, I have found no fault in you. But the rulers don't approve of you. Turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers." "But what have I done?" asked David. What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish answered, "I know that you have been as pleasing as my eye as the angel of God. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said he must not go with us into battle. Now get up early, along with your master's servants who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it is light." So David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went to Jezreel. Chapter 30. David destroys the Amalekites. David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev in Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and had taken captive the women and all who were in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men came to Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters had been taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in his spirit because his sons and his daughters. But David found strength in the Lord, his God. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, "Bring me the ephod." Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them?" "Pursue them," he answered. "You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue." David and the 600 men with him came to Besor ravine, where some stayed behind, for 200 men were too exhausted to cross the ravine. But David and about 400 men continued the pursuit. They found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. They gave him water to drink and food to eat, part of a cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, "To whom do you belong, and where do you come from?" He said, "I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev and the Kerethites and the territory belonging to Judah and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag." David asked him, "Can you lead me down to this raiding party?" He answered, "Swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you to them." He led David down, and there they were, scattered all over the countryside, eating and drinking and reveling because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until evening the next day, and none of them got away, except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything from the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder, or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back. He took all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock, saying, "This is David's plunder." Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him, who were left behind at the Besor ravine, and they came out to meet David and the people with them. As David and his men approached, he greeted them, but all the evil men and the troublemakers among David's followers said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered. However, each man may take his wife and children and go." David replied, "No, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and handed over to us the forces that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the men who stayed with the supplies is to be the same of that of him who went down to battle. All will share alike." David made this statute and an ordinance for Israel from that day to this. When David arrived in Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who were his friends, saying, "Here's a present for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies." And he sent it over to those who were in Bethel, Ramah, Negev, and Jatir, to those in Ahor, Sifron, Ethmel, and Rakal, to those in the towns of the Jerahmeelites and the Kenites, to those in Hormah, Bor Asham, Aphek, and Hebron, and to those in all the other places where David and his men had roamed. Chapter 33. Saul takes his life. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pressed hard after Saul and his sons, and they killed the sons of Jonathan, and Abinadab and Malchishah. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and when the archers overtook them, they wounded him critically. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me." But the armor-bearer was terrified and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and he fell on it. When the armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer and all the fighting men died together that same day. When the Israelites along the valley and those across the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled and that Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, and they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa, they cut off his head, stripped off his armor, and they sent messengers through the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of the Ashtaroth and fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard of what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men journeyed through the night to Bethshan, and they took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days.
Oh, good job, Miss Connie.
Thank you.
You got the seat warm?
I do.
Good job. Well, we'll start in 2 Samuel. David hears of Saul's death. After the death of Saul, David returned from striking down the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. On the 3rd day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. And when he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. "Where have you come from?" David asked him. He answered, "Oh, I have escaped from the Israelite camp." "What happened?" David asked. "Tell me." "The men fled from the battle," he replied. "Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." And David said to the young man who had brought him the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa," the young man said, "and there was Saul leaning on a spear with the chariots and their drivers in hot pursuit. And when he turned around, he saw me. He called out to me. I said, 'What can I do?' And he asked me, 'Who are you?' And an Amalekite, I answered. And then he said to me, 'Stand here by me and kill me. I am in the throes of death, but I am still alive.' So I stood beside him and I killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm, and I brought them here to you, my lord." Then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes, and they tore them. And they mourned and they wept and they fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord, and for the nation of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And David said to the young man who brought him the report, "Where are you from?" "I am the son of a foreigner, an Amalekite," he answered. And David asked him, "Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" And then David called one of his men and said, "Go, strike him down." So he struck him down, and he died. For David had said to him, "Your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, 'I killed the Lord's anointed.'" David's lament for Saul and Jonathan. And David took up this lament concerning Saul and his son Jonathan, and he ordered that the people of Judah be taught this lament as of the bow. It is written in the book of Jashar. "A gazelle lies slain on your heights, Israel. how the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice. Mountains of Gilboa, may you have neither dew nor rain. May no showers fall on your terraced fields. For there the shield of the mighty has despised the shield of Saul, no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back. The sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied. Saul and Jonathan, in life they were loved and admired, and in death they are not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned your garments with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of a woman. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished. Chapter 2 of 2 Samuel. David anointed king over Judah. In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah, he asked. The Lord said, go up. And David asked, where shall I go? To Hebron, the Lord answered. So David went up there with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. And the men of Judah came to Hebron, and where they anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. And when David was told that it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who had buried Saul, he sent messages to them to say to them, the Lord bless you for showing this kindness of Saul, your master, by burying him. May the Lord now show your kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul, your master, is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me king over them. The war between the houses of David and Saul. Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and brought him over to Manahem, and he made him king over Gilead. Now Ashuri and Jezreel, and also Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Now Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king of Israel, and he reigned 2 years. The tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Now Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, left Manahem and went to Gibeon. Now Joab, son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. And one group sat down on one side of the pool and the other group on the other side. And then Abner said to Joab, let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us. All right, let them do it, Joab said. So they stood up and were counted off, 12 men for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust the dagger into his opponent's side, and they fell down together. So that place in Gibeon was called Helkath Hazorim. The battle that day was very fierce, and Abner and the Israelites were defeated by David's men. The 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Ashiel. And now Ashiel was fleet-footed as a wild gazelle, and he chased Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he pursued him. And Abner looked behind him and asked, is that you, Ashiel? It is, he answered. And then Abner said to him, turn aside to the right or to the left, take one of the young men and strip him of his weapon. But Ashiel would not stop chasing him. Again, Abner went to Ashiel. Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face? But Ashiel refused to give up the pursuit. So Abner thrust the butt of a spear into Ashiel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. And he fell there and died on the spot. And every man stopped when he came to the place where Ashiel had fallen and died. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and the sun was setting, and they left to the hill of Ammah near Giah on the way to the wasteland of Gibeon. And then the men of Benjamin rallied behind Abner, and they formed themselves into a group, and they took their stand on top of the hill. And Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing these fellow Israelites?" And Joab answered, "As surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued pursuing them until morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the troops came to a halt, and they no longer pursued Israel, nor did they fight anymore. All that night, Abner and his men marched through the Arabah, and they crossed the Jordan, continued to the morning hours, and came to Mahanaim. And then Joab stopped pursuing Abner, and he assembled the whole army besides Ashiel, son of David's men, and 19 of David's men were found missing. But David's men had killed 360 Benjaminites who were with Abner. And they took Ashiel, and they buried him in his father's tomb at Bethlehem. And then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived at Hebron by daybreak. Chapter 3 of 2 Samuel. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David in Hebron. His first was Amnon, the son of Ahinon of Jezreel. His second, Chileab, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, the Shepirith, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithream, the son of David's wife, Eglah. And they were born to David in Hebron. Abner goes over to David. During the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner had been strengthened in his own position in the house of Saul. Now, Saul had had a concubine named Rizpah, daughter of Ai, and Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" And Abner was very angry because of what Ishbosheth said. So he answered, "Am I a dog's head on Judah's side? This very day I am loyal to the house of your father Saul and to his family and friends. I haven't handed you over to David. Yet now you accuse me of an offense involving this woman? May God deal with you, Abner, be it ever so severely, if I do not for David, if I do not do for David what the Lord promised him an oath, and transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul, and establish David's throne over Israel and Judah from Dan to Bathsheba." Ishbosheth did not dare to say another word to Abner because he was afraid of him. And then Abner sent messages on his behalf to say to David, "Whose land is it? Make an agreement with me, and I will help you bring all Israel over to you." "Good," said David. "I will make an agreement with you, but I demand one thing of you. Do not come into my presence unless you bring Michal, daughter of Saul, when you come to see me." And then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, demanding, "Give me my wife, Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins." So Ishbosheth gave orders and had her taken away from her husband, Patiel, son of Laish. And her husband, however, went with her, weeping behind her all the way by Hiram. And then Abner said to her, "Go back home." So he went back. And Abner conferred with the elders of Israel and said, "For some time you have wanted to make David your king. Now do it. For the Lord promised David, by my servant David, I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies." Now Abner also spoke to the Benjamites in person. And then he went to Hebron to tell David everything that Israel and the whole tribe of Benjamin wanted to do. Now when Abner, who had 20 men with him, came to David at Hebron, David prepared a feast for him and his men. And then Abner said to David, "Let me go at once and assemble all Israel for my lord the king, so that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may rule over all your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Now Joab murders Abner. Just then, David's men and Joab returned from a raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder. But Abner was no longer with David in Hebron, because David had sent him away and he had gone in peace. Well, when Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Abner, son of Ner, had come to the king, and that the king had sent him away, and that he had gone in peace. So Joab went to the king and said, "Hey, what have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Abner, son of Ner. He came to deceive you and observe your movements and find out everything you were doing." Pardon me. Joab then left David and sent messages after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah. But David did not know it. Now, when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into an inner chamber as if to speak with him privately. And there, to avenge the blood of his brother Ashiel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach, and he died. Later, when David heard about this, he said, "Oh, I am a kingdom or forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and on his whole family. May Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sore or leprosy, or leans on a crutch, who falls by the sword, who lacks food." Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Ashiel in the battle of Gibeon. And then David said to Joab and all the people with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner." King David himself walked behind the bier. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb. And all the people wept also, and the king sang this lament for Abner. "Oh, should Abner have died as the lawless die. Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. You fell as one who falls before the wicked." And all the people wept over him again. And then they all came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, "Oh, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I have tasted bread or anything else before the sun sets." And all the people took note and were pleased indeed. Everything the king did pleased them. So on that day all the people there and all Israel knew that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, son of Ner. And then the king said to his men, "Do you not realize that a commander and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And today, though I am the anointed king, I am weak, and these sons of Zerah, who are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds." Oh, Miss Connie, it's getting interesting.
Thank you. 2 Samuel chapter 4, Ishbosheth murdered. When Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel became alarmed. Now Saul's sons had 2 men who were leaders of raiding bands. One was named Baanah, and the other Rechab, and they were sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, from the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is considered a part of Benjamin because the people of Beeroth fled to Gittim and lived there as aliens to this day. Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell and became crippled. His name was Mephibosheth. Now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, set out for the house of Ishbosheth, and they arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab, his brother, Baanah, slipped away, and they had gone into the house while he was laying on the bed in his bedroom, and they stabbed and killed him. They cut off his head, taking it with them. They traveled all night by the way of Arabah, and they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to take your life. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah and the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of all trouble, when a man told me, 'Saul is dead,' and thought he was bringing me good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. This was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed? Should I now not demand his blood from your hands and rid the earth of you?" So David gave the order to his men, and they killed them. They cut off their hands and feet and hung the bodies by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. Chapter 5. David becomes king over Israel. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns, and the Lord said to you, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler.' When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a compact with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. David conquers Jerusalem. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, "David cannot get in here." Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, the city of David. On that day, David said, "Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind who are David's enemies." This is what they say, "The blind and the lame will not enter the palace." David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. He built up the area around it from the supporting terraces inward, and he became more and more powerful because the Lord, God Almighty, was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, along with the cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. And David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of the children born to him there: Shammua, Shoab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Neperig, Japhia, Elishama, Elida, and Eliphelet. David defends the Philistines. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" The Lord answered him, "Go, for I will surely hand the Philistines over to you." So David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them. He said, "As waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me." So that place was called Baal Perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more the Philistines came up and spread out over the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, "Don't go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the balsam trees. As soon as you hear the sound of the marching in the tops of the balsam trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine armies." So David did as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. Chapter 6. The Ark brought to Jerusalem. David again brought together out of Israel chosen men, 30,000 in all. He and all his men set out for Baal of Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim that are on the ark. They set out the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzziah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of the God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and the whole house of Israel were celebrating with the might before the Lord with songs, with harps and lyres and tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzziah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. Oh, the Lord's anger burned against Uzziah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath was broken out against Uzziah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzziah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went down and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fatted calf. David, wearing a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all his might, while he was while he and the entire house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts and sounds of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watching from a window, and when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it, and David sacrificed burnt offerings, fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women, and all of the people went to their homes. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, disrobing in the sight of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord, who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler of the Lord's people of Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by those slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Chapter 7. God's promise to David. After the king was settled in his palace and the Lord had given him rest from all the enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am, living in a palace of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." That night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, "Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, 'Why have you not built me a house of cedar?' Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture and from the flock, to be the ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men of the earth. And I will provide a place for my people Israel, and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them any more, as they did at the beginning, and have done ever since this time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with the rod of men, with floggings inflicted by men. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." Nathan reported to David all the words of this entire revelation. David's prayer. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, "Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family that you have brought me this far? And as if this were not enough in your sight, O sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. Is this your usual way of dealing with man, O sovereign Lord? What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, O sovereign Lord. For the sake of your word and according to your will, you have done this great thing and have made it known to your servant. How great you are, O sovereign Lord! There is no one like you. There is no God but you. As we have heard with our own ears, and who is like your people Israel, the one nation on earth that God went to redeem as a people for himself, and to make a name for himself, and to perform great and awesome wonders by driving out nations and their gods from before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. You have established your people Israel as your very own forever, and you, O Lord, have become their God. And now, Lord God, keep forever the promise you have made concerning your servants and his house. Do as you promised, so that your name will be great forever. Then men will say, the Lord Almighty is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established before you. O Lord God Almighty of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant, saying, I will build a house for you. So your servant has found courage to offer this prayer. O sovereign Lord, you are God. Your words are trustworthy, and you have promised these good things to your servant. Now be pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, O sovereign Lord, have spoken, and with your blessing, the house of your servant will be blessed forever.
Good job. Good job, Miss Connie. 2 Samuel chapter 8, David's victories. In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them, and he took Metheg, Ammon, from the control of the Philistines. And David also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them off of the length of cord, and every 2 lengths of them were put to death, and the 3rd length was allowed to live. So the Moabites became subject to David and brought him tribute. Moreover, David defeated Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah, when he went to restore his monument at the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. He hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. Now, when the Armenians of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons in the Armenian kingdom of Damascus, and the Armenians became subject to him and brought tribute. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. And David took the gold shields that belonged to the officers of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. From Teba and Berothai, towns that belonged to Hadadezer, King David took a great quantity of bronze. And when Tau, king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and congratulate him on his victory in battle over Hadadezer, who had been at war with Tau. Now Joram brought with him articles of silver, of gold, and bronze. And King David dedicated those articles to the Lord, as he had done with the silver and gold from all the nations he had subdued. Edom and Moab, the Ammonites and the Philistines, and Amalek, he also gave, dedicated to plunder taken from Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. And David became famous after he returned from the striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. And he put garrisons throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. And the Lord gave David victory wherever he went. David's officials. And David reigned over Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. And Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. And Jehoshaphat, son of Ahulad, was recorder. And Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. And Sarah was secretary. And Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites. And David's sons were priests. David and Mephibosheth, chapter 9. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. And they summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" And Ziba answered the king, "Well, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Well, where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. And when Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. And David said, "Oh, Mephibosheth!" "At your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore you to all your land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." And Mephibosheth bowed down, and he said, "Oh, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" And then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. And then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table, David's table like one of the king's sons. Now Mephibosheth had a son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. Chapter 10. David defeats the Ammonites. In the course of time, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. And David thought, "I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me." So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David came to the land of the Ammonites, the Ammonite commander said to Hanun, the Lord, "Do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you only to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" So Hanun seized David's envoys. He shaved off half of each man's beard. He cut off their garments at the buttocks and sent them away. And when David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. And the king said, "Hey, stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back." And when the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, they hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers from Beth-Rahab and Zobath, as well as the king of Maacah, with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tob. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with the entire army of fighting men. And the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle formation at the entrance of the city gate, while the Arameans of Zobah and Rahab and the men of Tob and Makkah were by themselves in the open country. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him, so he selected some of his best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. He put the rest of the men under the command of Abishai, his brother, and he deployed them against the Ammonites. And Joab said, if the Arameans are too strong for you, then I will come to rescue you. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. The Lord would do what is good in his sight. And Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites realized that the Arameans were fleeing, they fled before Abishai and went inside the city. So Joab returned from fighting the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. As the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they regrouped. Hadadezer and them had Arameans brought from beyond the Euphrates River, and they went to Helam with Shobach, the commander of Hadadezer's army, leading them. And when David was told of this, he gathered all Israel, he crossed the Jordan and went to Helam. The Arameans followed their battle lines to meet David, and they fought against him. But they fled before Israel, and David killed 700 of their charioteers and 40,000 of the foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobach, the commander of their army, and he died there. When all the kings who were the vassals of Hadadezer saw that they had been routed by Israel, they made peace with the Israelites and became subject to him. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore.
Good job, Mr. Frank.
Wow, man, this is good stuff, man. We're battling and God is winning. Oh, I love this.
Yeah. I learned a lot tonight. I hope you did too.
Oh, I did. I learned a tremendous amount.
Yeah, some of the
And,
stuff I'd forgotten.
Oh, I know it.
Man.
I'll tell you what, David was a mighty man for God, though. He followed him. He would not attack Saul.
I know.
It was God's anointed. And I think that teaches us a lesson, too.
Big time.
Teaches us a lesson.
Big time.
God's anointed. We better pay attention.
And then he was good to the grandkids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mephibosheth. Yeah, that was a great story. I love that.
That was great. Well, next week we have 2 special guests, and we have a great story next week, so you don't want to miss.
Oh, I'm not going to miss it. I'm going to miss it.
I figured you would be here. So we have Nancy McConnell coming back
Oh, sweet.
and Miss Willissa. So this gives you your
Oh,
chance.
yes, I'll
to
ask her
find
next
out-
week. You
Find
know.
out about going and reading to the kids.
Good deal.
So thanks so much for joining us again tonight. Next week will be week 15 already of 40.
Sweet.
So we're flying through the
Wow.
Bible. It goes
We
by
are.
so fast. And thank you, Miss Connie, for
Mr.
coming
My pleasure.
and hating that